Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. This month marks a new year. A new year, we always have those New Year's resolutions, a lot of new things we like to do. And a lot of times at this time, there's a lot of motivation to make changes. Today, we have someone new to help us speak a little bit deeper on this subject. Thank you so much for joining us, Katie, and just sharing your insight.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Robert, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No problem. I just want to share with those listening this disclaimer. If you are in the United States, 988 is a suicide hotline, lifeline. But wherever you are listening to this, find what works for you. I don't like reinventing the wheel. Find what resources, being proactive in that may be very helpful in those rainy days. I just want to begin. I always say this. I say this in nausea, but people say better than I do. Lao Tzu, a lot of people know him for the book. I'm drawing a blank, but he was a philosopher in China, and he has a lot of good sayings. And he says it this way: he says, "New beginnings are often disguised with painful endings." What comes to mind when you hear this quote? I'm asking you, Katie.
Yeah, new beginnings are often disguised as painful endings. It's like a codependent emotional attachment when
Mhm.
it's something that we've already known and we're so attached to it by like our circumstances from being in school, from our family, from our traditions, and then dismantling it. It seems like it's over. It seems like our whole life is over. But actually, when that bubble does burst, because it eventually will, because the only thing that is constant is change, is we are so in fear and we're so attached to the old canvas and to the past that we don't leave any room for the new white canvas and the new possibilities because we think it's just detrimental because it's all we know. So, or from, what people have told us. So, I've experienced this so many times in my life, although I know what I just shared, it doesn't make it any easier. It
No.
still does not make it any easier. It gives you some tools, but still there's that, primal thing about being attached to what we know and not wanting someone to be gone or not wanting a job to end. And then we're just in doomsday about it. So those are some of the thoughts that come to my mind instinctively.
Yeah, and I think about we kind of drawn to comfort. Sometimes to despite ourselves. I jokingly say that about my father. I don't care what award I win. He'll ask two questions: does it have a bathroom, and is there parking? That's it. Is there parking and is there a bathroom? My dad is very routine, but sometimes in that regard, it can limit us. Like you were kind of subtly mentioning, we kind of limit ourselves. Well, it's one thing to start, to let go on things, some painful memory. It's a whole nother thing to start a new canvas, a new chapter. That's scary. That means you're leaving the past. You can't how misery loves company. You can't just stay there. Oh, this is horrible because it's horrible, and to stay there, it's actually, I'm going to put myself out there. Albert Einstein says it this way. He says, no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it. So a lot of times I find that a lot of people don't really denote Albert Einstein. He was not just a brilliant mathematician. He was also very philosophical in how he approached life, and what comes to mind when you hear this quote? Katie?
Yeah. No problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that was created. So let's just say you have 50 thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're wanting to solve a problem and you keep doing the same thing over and over because you have those same 50 thoughts. So a new level of consciousness is maybe having 5 more thoughts or 10 more thoughts or 5 more friends or 10 more friends of us getting out of our routines. And so it expands our consciousness. So then there could be a solution to the problem.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes we just look at the surface level. We look at the goal, not look at the things, the steps, the habits, or the changes that may bring us there. But I feel that Albert Einstein also mentions a intriguing point that a lot of us just think about having stuff, gaining stuff, not actually becoming something else. My whole thing is, I could get a big windfall from inheritance, but if my mindset is about everything but it hasn't changed and I still struggle with finances, it won't change. It will not change. It was how I view value, how I set parameters. If I don't value my own time, no one else will. So that in itself kind of denotes this value. Instead of I'm seeking answers elsewhere, I'm seeking it within because I'm having the self-talk necessary to get there. That's what a lot of times I'm thinking. I ask you this, Katie, because you're new. I want to give you a moment so I don't overspeak, but also to give you an opportunity for those listening to get to know you a little bit better. So this is your opportunity to share what brought you to doing what you're doing today, and anything else that you feel comfortable sharing to those listening.
Yeah, on the moment of what you just shared, I want to say how important, you know, the space of value and how meditation is so important. And whether you're meditating X, Y, and Z, all the numerous ways we could know or not know about meditation, and if we're in our head, if we're getting it right or not, it's a part of having some kind of routine and ritual that you mentioned earlier, that whether it's when you wake up in the morning, it's a routine and ritual that you do this, or throughout the day, if you're taking off a load to transition into the evening, or if it's at night, or all of them. But it's important without any electronics and no like cellular activity, maybe just a cup of water, and we're just sitting there and just letting the nature sounds of the birds go by, or the ambulances go by if you're in a city, or whatever it may be, or if you're in your parents' house, or someone's house. But it's important to go to a room or to a space that's a sacred space. And if you don't have that, make it. And if you don't have it in your home, maybe it's a tree you go to, maybe it's something nearby so it's convenient, but something that we go to, and we just set an alarm, and we just set it for like 30 minutes or 20 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour if you have the luxury, and just sit there and breathe and contemplate. Allow the thoughts to come and go, all those thoughts that do. But then when you're doing that, we allow, our thoughts, our neurotransmitters, everything on a cellular level, just to like set and reset. And just like it leaves a crack and an opening for the unknown, instead of getting to like what everyone else in the world needs and wants you to do by, putting yourself first. Like if you don't value your time, like you said, no one else will. So having those moments that are linear called time, just to sit with self and allow to the unexpected to happen. And maybe sometimes it doesn't, maybe sometimes it does, maybe sometimes it does, and then it doesn't happen for a while, or maybe it doesn't. But you keep in this practice in the routine, because you're allowing space and showing the universe and yourself, and you're creating space. And when you do that, then other people will feel and know that, because we are the ripple effect, and it starts with us. So I think it's really important. I did it this morning, and not only did I do it this morning, when I was done, I decided, I'm going to sit for a bit longer, and I didn't put a time on it. And it was a short thing, but a heap of gratitude came to my heart, and I was just like, I'm so proud of myself. I'm so grateful. And it just came, and I just needed that gust of that came through my own heart before I like started moving around, and before like the wind gets you and the day gets you, and then you're here, so it's important to take those moments when you have that intuitive hit, like, oh, I need this, because we bury ourselves with it. I'll do it later. I have to do 19 things first. But knowing that intuitive hit, and then knowing that we're ignoring that, and so honoring it and putting it first. And the more we practice and do that, the easier it will become to show up for ourselves. And then we can share that with the people we love and care about, because they'll start to see, and then they'll come to us, and we can share those things. Not that we have to be a projection onto that, like, this is what I'm doing. But if they come to you and they ask, then you can create space and share. Maybe not overshare. Be aware if it's reciprocated, if they're coming to you for more, or you just give them a gem or two, and then you just leave it like that. So that's the art of it as well.
Yeah. And, I thought of a funny story. When I was little, my mom used to get so upset. Whenever I did a math problem and I erased it, I didn't blow the stuff off. I was always such in a rush. My mom got so upset. All that eraser dust. She was like, Robert, why don't you just blow it off? And then it'll be clean and you can do it. No, I was so rushed. Funny thing is, like, now I do my best work, I know, when I slow down. When I'm able to slow down. I'm able to do my best work when I slow down. I don't do good work rushed. The idea is sometimes when I was really bad for me, I literally, whenever I made my tea, I'll take each step and just focus on that step, and that's it. Try to block out everything else. And you invest time in yourself like that, you'll be amazed of, at least from my experience, of how much more rested you feel. Rest is different for everyone. Like, there's always sleep, but there's also mental rest. I work in the mental health field, so you can have that compassion fatigue that is very common, especially if you don't put boundaries. One thing I realized real quick was I cannot help everyone. And that's very human for me to say, but it doesn't stop me. The work being hard doesn't stop me. Get what I'm saying?
1,000.
Yeah. The work being hard is the reason we do the work.
Yeah.
So that for me, I think sometimes we lose track of convenience. I'm helping someone, I'm serving someone. That's an inconvenience, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to do it. You get what I'm saying? The idea is helping people. Sometimes we get stuck on the good feeling, but at the same time, it's also helping people and knowing what your limits are. I know that I saw on your profile that you're a Greek actress. All right.
Yes.
This is a Greek word. I don't know if I know how to say this right, but I like.
Say
it
oh,
again?
sorry. Oh, it's something else. Sorry.
Okay. This is my wife has this untranslatable words. It's Meraki, I guess. I have no clue how the actual phonetic is.
Meraki, yeah.
And it says pouring yourself wholeheartedly into something and doing something with soul, creativity, and love. The reason the untranslatable words is there's no other word like this in any other language that describes it in this way. And I found it very interesting because my wife loves languages and she has this book, and I thought, I wanted to include this. I do it in other podcasts, but it's interesting how words kind of mean different things for each person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And culturally, cross-culturally, it's not just words. A lot of times it's our body language, how we are approachable versus not approachable. And I don't know. I just wanted to share that with you. Also kind of runs with the theme, because when we pour ourselves wholeheartedly into something, it can be very positive. A lot of times I ask my clients, do you have a hobby? They're like, am I allowed to have a hobby? Am I okay enough? I say yes. I feel it's very important to have a hobby. Anyway, I didn't want to take that. Is there anything else you wanted to share with those listening about yourself and anything about your story? Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I love Meraki, and what you were saying about that is, it's curiosity, it's passion, it's the soul. Like, there's things we know on a surface level, but the depths of the soul and the hard work you mentioned is getting to the depths of that mysteriousness, which makes up life,
Yeah.
And the thing is, I have a poetry book. I would love to gift it to you and your wife. It's called A Lover's Fairy Tale. Everyone can get it on Amazon, loversfairytale.com. And I love language. I love words. Growing up Greek, I was raised with Aristotle and Plato. Like, The Republic by Plato is my favorite book, and Socrates. And I always joke I'm Socrates' spiritual younger sister. And, his definition of a philosopher is a seeker who's a lover of wisdom. And I feel I am that. And language, growing up with hymns and, going into the church and all that. And I had this independent space of being Greek and being very independent, growing up outside of Detroit, Michigan. I loved quotes, and I read poetry. And then I found on my journey, when I was publishing my first book, A Lover's Fairy Tale, that there's certain poets that write about certain things. And I found, I'm a poet that always writes about love. I always write about imagination and love. And so when people are so linear, or they're doing just all the mundane things all the time, like, that's why music, is so important, and it moves through our soul. It's language that we, can't express, but we can feel. If we try to express it, it doesn't come out, because it's that, it's that transparent feeling that can't be equated to words in such a way. But poetry and all this curiosity moves us out of our routine, move us out of our psyche, you know. I read a book by Alejandro Younger. He's from Uruguay. It's called Clean, and he's New York Times bestseller 3 times now. And the 12th chapter talks about quantum detoxification. You were saying the psyche. So we have our environmental toxins of, you know, our families and our communities, and people are saying things and we attune to it or we don't. There's our physical toxins, you know, in our products. There's also, like you said, the mental, you know, toxins in our mind, and to dismantle the psyche in such a way. And I've gone through many transitions, and right now in end of 2022, going into 2023, I call it retiring. Like I'm retiring from what I thought I wanted, from what I thought I knew, from what expectations I had of myself. I'm retiring, and it's just like this psyche knowing from within that I'm retiring and throwing in the towel and I'm done with that. Doesn't mean I'm done with life. I'm just retiring from the things that I thought, to create space for a cumulative of what I know, and making a lighter load for, you know, where I want to go in the continuum. Also, there's this woman, Caroline Myss, M-Y-S-S. She's a mystic intuitive from Chicago. Your wife probably knows her, but she has a TED Talk called Choices. And people think the macro choices, breaking up with someone, getting a divorce, moving, are the macro choices. Those are actually the micro choices, right? They're not the macro choices. The macro choices are, you know, showing up for this podcast, waking up in the morning, brushing our teeth. It's the micro choices that make up the macro, you know. And so she's a wordsmith. I idolize her. I follow her lead. She's amazing. Caroline Myss. She's a great study if anyone wants to tune into that.
You know, it's when I'm thinking about just how we communicate. You mentioned music. It's sometimes just speaking a word is not enough. You know, I could say, and I feel especially in the work environment, when you're dealing with people, one thing that I've noticed is we may know a lot of knowledge, but the thing is, problem solving is creative. If you really think about it. If you really think about problem solving, a lot of times, if a computer, well, old days, it tries to find a solution, it'll just go through a random list, just through a list. Sometimes, as humans, creativity kind of, I feel that sets us apart, especially when you're given a situation that is unique, because, like you said, things are constantly changing. You know, the one thing, I'm in the church and I would do the sound. One thing I used to love doing this sound, and I would be the one. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're great at the sound." I don't like that anymore, Katie. I want people to learn the sound. I would rather just be in the back, just sharing, and it's not about me. For me, it's about growth. If I can't teach or emulate or pass on what I know, then it's worth nothing. If I can't share what I know, that get kind of, it doesn't. So for me, sometimes I step aside, not that I'm giving up, like you say, I'm stepping aside to make room for other people to have that opportunity I didn't have or wouldn't have if someone was in there. So sometimes, like, I think in life in general, a lot of times we do change our roles. For me, it's more now, it's about, I get excited when people do well. I get excited these little victories. I get excited because I just know how hard it is, especially now, to communicate your feelings, to even know what you want or what direction. And I think Nicole Sabon says sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go, but rather learning to start over. We let go so many times, and then we still have the same train of thought, like Albert Einstein said, and it happens again. You know, but we never go, hey, why does this happen? And try to problem solve it, and not in the way what we think other people may think we need to do, but maybe what we want. And sometimes that's a painful journey, because a lot of times we have to really look at ourselves in the mirror.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, why do you feel sometimes it's so hard for us to start over, even if what was previous was less healthy for us? From your experience, what you've seen, and your own, go ahead.
Yeah. What do I feel sometimes is so hard? Why is it so hard for us to start over, even if the previous was less healthy for us? Maybe I'll just go to a professional setting here. Um, so I did acting, right? I do acting.
Yeah.
And when I started acting,
Mhm.
it was different. I was getting the yellow pages. I was going to IMDb. I was a different age type. I was new to Hollywood. And I gained success in so many ways. And then I chose to take time off on screen acting. I was still doing voiceovers,
Yeah.
animation, commercials, video games. And I was still acting, but voiceover acting, which is a different breed than on-screen acting.
Mm.
And the industry looks at it like, like what happened to her, like why didn't she make it? And they're taking all the new people off the train or whatever who are coming in. And so to get started again was just so hard, and I kept like having to start over, and then it just takes so much focus. And some of the tools I was doing before, because I know the industry, weren't aligning to evolvement of technology and the society of how the industry is run, because it's ever changing like life. So I don't want to the part of, even if it was less, even if it was previous was less healthy for us. So when it comes to that, it's like I had to stop myself because I wasn't aligning to the roles that I needed to book, because I needed to do some internal work that I couldn't explain to the industry, but I knew I had to do it within myself. Yeah. So I don't know if that would be, if it was less healthy for me though.
No, I think maybe the wording of what I was trying to say, but I think you kind of hit what I was trying to say, is that you noticed that you needed to shift, pivot to what you were doing. And sometimes it's harder for people. I think really the question is what we were kind of saying. You had that self-talk, and you had you made the decision. Whether it was healthy or not healthy, we don't know until later on as we make the decision and see it through. I think a lot of times, what I was trying to get at is sometimes we know things are bad in our lives and we want to let go, but sometimes just letting go, starting over, seems too far from us, seems too much of a distant thing for us to achieve. So it's a struggle to start over, as opposed to I guess maybe this one might
cut out for a second. It cut out for a second.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, but I mean, to go on a personal level, it's like I was in a relationship that wasn't healthy for me, but I felt like I had to grow through that journey to learn what I did. And we're like so empowered, each of us, but as friends and as like partners, as artists. But the thing that we were talking about earlier about the emotional attachment and not wanting it to end, like for something better to happen. And then, that relationship being over. And yeah, there was a lot of scarcity about like starting over and being back out there with the whole new world and so many options and so many things. And I'm like, not that same person, like of what I once knew. And like, I'm a mess because I'm like, I went through the stuff I went through, and I feel like I'm taking all that with me into the new relationship. But they don't know any of that, but like you feel all of that stuff, Yeah. So I'm still, not in a relationship since that relationship, but I have moved on. But I didn't move on in a relationship. I moved on in a relationship with self and got clear and confident with myself, and that stuff just fizzled away. But it's like tools in my chest that I can utilize to know when I'm meeting future partners, which I have, that it's a red flag, that they're not good for me. I'm not putting, like, I went through it once and I did it and I was one and done, and I'm not putting myself through that again. There's a difference between like knowing that, giving yourself the respect and time and space to differentiate, opposed to like jumping into a new relationship and having the same cycles happen again. So I think it could be advantageous in a way if you look at it as a tool to propel you forward of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah, and I feel like certain lessons are, harder to learn. Just it's so intangible. Like it was something like if I was a child and I put my hand on something hot, I'm not gonna touch it because it hurts.
Yeah.
As opposed to something less tangible, because it's hard to connect with people. Let's be honest. We have all these ways to connect, but the trust is not there. Internet is there. We can connect with everyone, but we don't really connect. I remember just, one thing, especially in the church environment, or even with my peers, or even at work, I try to learn the skill of just making the person feel like no matter how many people are there, they're the only one I'm talking to. That's it. It's a skill that's hard to do because we're distracted so many times. So I feel the question, I feel some problems, some hurts takes longer. We could look back and say, oh, why did I allow myself to go through that? I feel that's short-sighted sometimes. We're a little bit too hard on ourselves, because that process is what makes us who we are today. Like, I feel there's certain things that, obviously people may learn quicker, but we're not considering the cultural context, our family upbringing, all that kind of develops who we are. Because, we look at our parents' relationships, we kind of look at them as, and not everyone had a positive upbringing. So for me, it's not a one size fits all kind of scenario. It's something that I think, like I said in the beginning, find what works for you. I remember very distinctly, even though I'm faith-based, I work with a client and they say, I don't want to have anything to do with church. I don't want you to have anything to do with church, because the fact of the matter is, if it's something that's harmful, something that's negative, forcing something on that doesn't help. And on the other end, I think the self-talk, especially when it comes to starting a new chapter, is so important, because the whole world's going to tell you what to do, what you need to do.
I have an analogy that I use with my coaching clients. I do personal one-on-one coaching with clients, and I look at it as a trampoline, right? So I have me, you have you, and then we have our little self, how we would treat our little self. So I look at it as like a trampoline, like you're playing, you're jumping up, or you have the courage to get on the trampoline, you're jumping up and down on the trampoline, you don't go as high, you fall, you're gonna fall. Like, it's not like doomsday, like, oh my God, I messed up and I'm so you can see how hard they are on themselves when they're like, I'm so stupid. I'll be like, oh, I'm so silly, or silly me, like how you would talk to a child, talk to ourselves, lean in. No, like, I'm jumping up and down on the trampoline, I'm going to fall. How hard am I going to fall? Oh, I fell hard that time. Okay. Not laugh at myself, not berate myself, but like, oh, you fell, you're going to fall. Do you want to play now or later? Okay. Whenever you're ready, you get up and play again. I'm going to try again. I'm going to try to get to 10 again. And it's like, oh, I got to 5, or oh, I got to 8, or I got to 7. And it's like, oh, I got to 2. And it's like, okay, you can just try again. Just get back on that trampoline and just do it again. But it's a dance of playing and having fun with it, right? Because it's not the, ultimate destination. It's the journey of how we get there. Because when we get there, then what, right? It's like, then there's going to be another journey. So how do we treat ourselves? How do we treat our family? How do we treat our spouses? How do we treat people around us while we're doing it? We want to hold hands and make it interactive and have fun with one another while we're here on this planet. There's already the other stuff, so we don't have to add to that. That's not one of our missions and drives when we come into the world as primal beings.
And I feel like, you mentioned a very good point in the process. A lot of times we the trampoline, the normalization of emotion. I would say this is an interesting side note. A lot of times I'm a big guy. And when I was younger, people say, oh, he can lift a lot of stuff. So a lot of times when someone's like, oh, we're moving, oh, I'm the first person called, Katie. So as a young guy, I just knew back then, I was like, it's gonna suck, because they didn't have anything prepared. Everything's just like awkwardly shaped, going downstairs. But the funny thing about it is, as I grew older, and I noticed that if I prepare my mind enough, it's not that the situation changes. It's just, I know it's gonna suck. I know it's gonna be hard. And also it allows me to also be a little bit more graceful to myself. Like, if I make a mistake, I am gonna make a mistake. It's like, it's not that I'm trying to make a mistake, but this is something that's just a part of the process of learning. You don't learn much from the successes, but from the mistakes you make. But if you just shortly spend a lot of time on your successes, but not any time on the mistakes, and what I feel sometimes that could counterbalance some of the lessons you could learn, which kind of segue to kind of my question to you.
Well, first I want to give you an analogy of what you just talked about.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
This is just like a short analogy, but let's just use the moving situation, right? So they're calling you because they need something. Well, what about your needs, right?
Yeah.
So then, but you can empower yourself, flip the script, and say, okay, they're calling me for this need. They know I can do it. I know I can do it. But it's a choice if you want to do it. You could have parameters and boundaries set up. If you absolutely don't want to do it, then you're busy and off the market, period. Another thing is, if you want to do it, they're a friend or a family member, or it's getting you some cash in your pocket, or you just want to do it, then you can, set up boundaries. Hey, this is when I'm available, this date and this date, because it's convenient for you. It's not only fulfilling their cup, but it needs to fulfill your cup. So how is it fulfilling your cup? Is it serving them, or is it serving you? So another thing one can do is, like, say you're the go-to person all the time for this. So whatever situation or principle it may be, let's say you have like a list of 5 things, like, okay, like, I'm willing to help you under these circumstances, that it's between these hours, that they're packed and organized in boxes, that the U-Haul is already going to be there, and that, I'm going to be allotted X amount of hours. So you say your needs of the stuff, like, you want to help, but you don't want to do the stuff you don't want to do. So the stuff that you don't want to do, you can set up parameters. So those things can being handled, and those things are taken care of. So you don't have to take all of the weight for that thing.
Yeah.
And that's just healthy communication and making sure we meet the baseline of our own needs. Because for us to truly help another individual, to be there to help them, we need to make sure we're helping ourselves first and taking care of ourselves. If we're not actually taking care of ourselves first, we're not actually helping other people. We're actually going to have resentment towards those things and to that relationship.
And I totally agree. When I was illustrating the young person, obviously I knew I didn't have any boundaries. At that time I was young, just impressionable. But I guess you make a good point, because there's assertive communication, there's the passive communication, and there's the communication that you get to when you don't set boundaries. The aggressive communicator. So I do find nowadays, if someone asks me, obviously I want to help, but if I have nothing to give after I help, then I have nothing to give. You can't give what you don't have. So for me, I do take a lot of account. I do. I feel a lot of times the idea of helping others is a good one, but at the same time, don't do it despite yourself. I'll tell you this along with your analogy. I would say a large percentage of a lot of my clients I see are saving the world before they end up in my office. So I would say take care of yourself. A lot of times, and this is going to be kind of a weird kind of illustration. Some people have such passive communication. Their whole life is that to make someone else happy makes them valued. That's it. And a lot of us have those moments in various degrees. But a lot of times it can be toxic if the person manipulative and taking advantage of that situation. What I tell these people a lot of times is, if you become homeless, because they're at that point, will the person sit there being homeless with you? And a lot of times they won't. So like if you, I know it's kind of very bold and to the point, but a lot of times,
you have to get to the raw. You have to get to the raw core of the truth of it.
Yeah, because at the same time, you see these people reinforcing my value is externally. And I would say, no, it's not. It's something that you need to internally have that self-talk and put parameters and have, that's how you can start to build what you actually want for yourself. And that will ever change, like we've been talking about. This has been great.
Real quick, like a lot of times when we have our moral compass and our virtues and of how we are, we automatically set an expectation in our mind. That's how everyone else is. And that's where I found a huge detriment all the time, because I held people at this such esteem in such a way. And I've been burnt so many times, and I was actually in denial about it over and over, because wanting to have the virtue of everything being good and everything being positive, I was actually in delusion of not seeing the truth, because I didn't want to believe it as so, and I was just so sheltered around these things, and I was scared of that, of taking off that belief of everything's rainbow and positives, because I thought I was gonna, inflict and have dark and bad things start happening in my stratosphere, and I wanted to keep it at bay and like non-existent.
Yeah, and I kind of preface this a lot. Viktor Frankl is Man Finding Meaning. He mentions this kind of subtle nuance when he was at the concentration camp that a lot of people, they didn't have. A lot of people didn't have. People were saying, well, you should. There was a lot of fear. And he's taking account of all this, and he said the people who did well could see past the concentration camp. They saw that there was something else beyond what they were experiencing. They were giving their bread, half their bread. They were helping people, but they're like, oh, you need to keep that for yourself, because you're not going to make it. But these people are stuck on the fact that they're not going to make it. A lot of times the idea is, if you feel that you're not going to be able to do it, you're probably right. You're not going to do it because you already thought that you're not going to do it. So in that same parameters, I think I have the same kind of lesson that I've learned is, be kind to yourself. Give yourself that grace, but also know that your choice is yours. What you choose to do is yours. No one could take that choice away from you in that regard. So don't, I guess outsource your value in a weird way. Don't outsource your value to something else that it can be, I don't know how you say, that has no attachment to you, because then you'll be codependent to that actually working out. And I know in long-winded ways saying, take time for yourself. I want to ask you, segueing, what have been your drive and motivation to get up and keep doing what you're doing today? I know I asked you your lesson, but we kind of said that.
Well, I apologize, but I need to take a moment, because I have a thought and a theory off of what you just said a moment ago.
Okay, go ahead.
So what came up for me is The Richest Man in Babylon. The Richest Man in Babylon, you can listen to on audio. Overdrive, it's an app, Libby, Libby, and you just put your number and your library code. Takes 30 seconds to get a library card if you don't have one. You can download up to 30 audiobooks per month for free. So I love audiobooks and education. And The Richest Man in Babylon talks about some of the things you just mentioned, and I would like to put it into terms of, like, let's say I get a golden nugget, and I'm Greek and I'm passionate and everything's like sharing and caring. So I get this golden nugget, and I take the golden nugget, and I'm like, oh my God, this golden nugget's amazing. I want my mom to feel it. I want my dad to see it. I want my sisters and brothers to experience. I want my friends. So I'll be like, here you go. It's like getting a cake, right? And instead of just like taking the cake and enjoy it for yourselves, or taking that piece of gold and enjoy it for myself, I give it away. And a lot of people who are cultured and passionate, and a lot of people who don't come from certain money backgrounds, have this same psychology. Well, they'll take it and they want to give it away, the shirt off their back immediately. So what the book teaches you in a nutshell, in a gold shell, I guess you could say, is the richest man in Babylon is like, you get a piece of gold, and it's like, oh my God, there's gold. Yes, I want to give it away. I want everyone else to experience it. But what I do is I put the gold over here. Then I get another one, and I want to give it away, but I put it over here. Then it keeps happening. Okay, let's say 50 golden nuggets later, like, although I may feel selfish, but I'm testing out an experience, and I put it over here. Then I look and I'm like, oh my God, I have a gold mountain. It went from like a nibble. It went these 50 gold nibbles each time. It went to like from a nibble to this mountain. Then it's like, okay, if I get a gold nugget, that I have this mountain, I can share it, because you have your gold lined up. So that analogy can be used for anything in anyone's life, right? Like starting a secret savings, and just even if it's $5 or $10 or $50 or $100 or however, and you look at it 6 months later or a year later, and you're collecting for yourselves and allocating that for yourselves, then you're like, oh my God, I have this golden mountain. I have this cushion for myself. And then, it supports us when our prefrontal cortex shuts down and we're in survival mode of fight and flight. And when shit really hits the fan, it's like, oh my gosh, like you have a cushion. Although you may have that cushion based on how you were taught and brought up in survival mode of not having enough abundance, not having enough, people will still have that primitive, that reptilian, brain of that fear mongering that will happen. Although it may happen, you still have this golden savings over here, or that golden mountain over here, so you're creating space for self, for more harmonious living and lifestyle, and actually enrichment for yourself and for others. And you can keep it for yourself. You don't have to let everyone know what you're doing. It can just be an intimate relationship with self.
Yeah, and one thing that kind of spoke to me when you were talking was, a lot of times we make these, decisions, or we think too short term. Like, if we're really thinking about life, I feel horrible right now. Obviously not taking light or minimizing the experience is okay. Do you want to feel good right now, or do you want to work towards feeling good that's sustained? It's the long-term version or the short-term version. And sometimes it's delayed gratification. A lot of times there's been research on this, but delayed gratification, the restraint, if I give you a present, Katie, a lot of times it's weird for a lot of people to get a present from someone maybe they don't know. We're not very good at receiving gifts. Sometimes one thing I learned is sometimes you're robbing an opportunity for someone to give you something, And a lot of times, I don't need it, and they're so reluctant, but they realize that they're not being, I would say, helpful for the person. Maybe that person wants to give a gift, and
it's their love language. Yeah. The gift of the presence, to give the gift. Like you said, it's difficult to us to receive, and it's actually not receiving it. It could make them feel bad or sad, because it's their way of like showing love, but it's also a way of someone not knowing how to receive love, and that's something to look at. And so I do with my coaching clients, when that happens, I say for 90 days, say yes to everything. When someone wants to gift you something, when someone wants to take you for dinner and pay for it, or if someone wants to call you and talk, or anything they want to gift you, no matter what it is, for 90 days, because that empowers us just to say yes and allow, and you're like, you wait 90 days later, you're like, oh wow, then it becomes not so in your head, because we're helping change a pattern.
Yeah, and I feel like we stopped really looking at relationships or friendships as transactional, and that it's the thing is, our lives are going to be unfinished our whole life. If you're okay with that, we could actually not get stuck on these kind of modalities. I remember when I was in my 20s. Yeah, I probably should have accepted more gifts. I was really struggling, but if I put my pride ahead of myself and say, no, I'm going to go ahead and figure this on my own bootstraps, it's commendable, but at the same time, it's not, because you're not really being realistic or taking the time. You're just it's uncomfortable feeling not having, or having abundance. So you're like, you know what? I'm just going to be here bitter, and you don't think that's going to affect you in other ways that you don't even think it will affect you later down the road, because you're like, well, I later on, maybe you get out of that little hole, but you isolate yourself from everyone else because you did it yourself. But the fact is, we're not islands. And that, for me, I think when it comes to starting a new chapter, recognizing your life is not ever going to be finished, but at the same time, giving yourself grace and giving yourself time to kind of figure it out as you start a new chapter. Any final thoughts? I know we've been talking a lot. I just want to kind of, it's been really an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Katie. Any final thoughts you want to share with those listening as we wrap up?
Yeah. After you're done with this podcast episode, you can head over to She's All Over the Place podcast. We're in the top 1.5% podcast out of almost 4 million podcasts. It's ethics, morals, and values in arts and entertainment. Some of the stuff we've been talking about now, mental wellness. So that's really exciting for people to check out. She's all over the place. My Chonacas.com is my website. So everything that I'm up to is on there. It's CHONACAS.com. Yeah. I'm focused on my second poetry book. So hopefully I'll be releasing it in the next couple months, which I'm excited about.
That's awesome. Sorry,
yeah. And it's something you mentioned that came up for me is like, I was just having a conversation with my sister the other day, and it's like, cause we grew up Greek. So we grew up very passionate, independent. My, dad's side of the family came over from the old country, from Greece. So we were raised very independent and, very pride that you said. And so I can't imagine how others are, and I've had a very successful career the last 2 decades. And now I'm at the point in my life where, yes, I can. Yes, I proved to myself. Who was I proving it to? The world and to myself. Now it's like, okay, I proved to myself. I did it. And I rejected a lot from not knowing how to receive. I feel like 2 things. One, the point of life is being able to learn those intrinsic moments of receiving and gifting and moving past the uncomfortability and those emotions and learning those lessons that make up our lives. And, now I'm at the point where we start a new chapter in 2023 is just because I can do it on my own, just because I can and I have, doesn't mean I have to. Just because I can, doesn't mean I have to. Just because, so now I'm able to receive in a whole new way that I wasn't ready before. I needed to be ready. And sometimes we can't always start when we're ready. Sometimes when there's that awareness and we can shape shift and trial and error and try new things, like I'm going to try this, one baby step at a time or massive leaps at a time. But now I'm excited to, change the dynamics of how I thought I wanted things and how I thought it should be and how it's going to happen, to now allowing new ways to be able to receive and do things with other people in ways that I haven't before. And so I'm excited to grow through that journey and have a new experience. Yeah. So
thank you so much. I wanted to share with those listening that all her links to everything will be in the notes so you could find out what Katie is doing. Thank you so much. I wanted to share with those listening that you can find out all our links for Revive Ministries from the website, reviveministriesfl.com. This is goodbye from Revive Ministries Podcast. Leave with his last quote. F. Scott Fitzgerald. What you just said kind of fits really closely to this. It is not merely enough to have ability to be persistent. You must also have the ability to start over. Thank you so much.
Thank you.